Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to number 56 of the Lenko Show. Today, here again with Chris. Hi, Chris.
Hello, broski.
How you doing, bro?
I'm good, mate. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Believe it or not, some people probably think me and you are actually having this conversation just as one person, and it's not actually two people in
I
existence.
think for anyone who's not watching the YouTube, they're just like, why is this guy talking to himself?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I could probably pull that off. I know I have pulled that off in the past in some episodes where I've had a conversation with you on my own.
Do you know what, mate? You've done that a lot of times in real life as well.
Some things will never change. It's one of my many skills. Anyway, today on today's show, I'm very excited about this. I don't know about you. You excited for this?
I'm hugely excited. Do you know when people talk about like role models and things like that?
Mm.
Ben is very much like if Batman were alive and around, this is him. This is him.
Well, I feel like of all the billionaires in the world, and not one of them really has tried to become Batman. I know I've mentioned this on the podcast before. It's very disappointing. I feel like there's a couple of people out there that are making a good fist of it, like Tom Cruise. I feel like he's doing it the right way. I feel like if I had all of his money, if I can get myself to that level of wealth while I'm in still a reasonable status of health, I'd be doing all that shit he's doing. I'd be learning to fly planes, jump off trains, and
What
do
about
all
the
kinds
cult?
of cool stuff. What?
What about the cult?
Oh, the Scientology thing.
Yeah,
Interestingly, I know
yeah.
where one of those is in Manchester. I walked past it when I was going for my wedding suit, so I know where it is. So I can show you if you want. Do you want to join?
Should we go?
We could definitely do that. I,
We should
in
go and
fairness,
see.
I read out because it's a religion, isn't it? Scientology. It's a religion. So I read out a lot of the fundamental beliefs to my fiance, Fiona, and she's Catholic. So I read out a lot of the fundamental beliefs, and she said, "Sounds a lot like a cult," and I was like, "No, no, no, sounds a lot like a religion. It's the
Yeah,
same stuff."
it
Anyway,
is.
so like you say, today's guest, I feel like Elon Musk just needs to sponsor him with £1 billion and say, right, off you go and be Batman. And I feel like he'd figure it out.
I feel like he would.
We'll throw that to him when he first comes on. So, waiting in the wings, ladies and gentlemen, we have today's guest. It is Ben Akin, who is a former Royal Marine Commando and now spends his days doing many things. One of those is running Ironmans, triathlons, and all kinds of crazy endurance stuff. So we will dig in and pull his brain to pieces, find out what he knows, and hopefully provide you with some entertaining and useful information, as we always try and do here on the Lenko Show, as we always try and do. And for once, I don't think we're actually going to get into the whole political correctness around transvestites and all that kind of thing, competing in athletic sports. So we're not, Chris. We're going to stay well away from that today, aren't we?
Well, we can try our best.
We'll give it a good go. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, Ben Akin.
Roger. Hello, Ben. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good. Thanks. Thanks for
Good.
having me.
So, me and Alex were just talking about how we are actually really, really excited to have you on. So, there's a lot of things we want to go through, but for the listeners first, can you just give us a brief synopsis of who you are, your life, the things that you've done, so that other people can understand as well?
Yeah, so I kind of got Ben Akin for those who don't know me. Everyone generally now probably knows me for doing triathlon, long distance stuff, Ironman predominantly. I kind of got into fitness back probably as an 11-year-old when I went to high school. Inadvertently got thrown into cross country and did pretty well at it in school, and it kind of became my identity for my whole of my school career. Was running, athletics, middle distance running. I represented England as an 800-meter runner as a junior, and then went off to Loughborough Uni thinking I'm going to go and be full-time, like professional middle distance athlete. And yeah, I'd always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to join the Marines, and I got kind of halfway into my second year at Loughborough and just kind of fell out of love with running, I think. Probably due to the environment at Loughborough and the nature of how serious everything was. I just kind of lost the love for it. So I quit uni, but stayed in Loughborough because I didn't want to tell my parents yet. So I quit uni, started the application process to join the Marines, which I'd always had in the back of my mind anyway. And then, yeah, I think in the January of 2013, knew that I'd like passed and got accepted and that I'd be starting training in the September. So at that point, I moved home and kind of announced as I got home, like I'm going in the Marines in 6 months' time.
Surprise.
Yeah, which
how did that go down?
I guess it's not every mother's first choice of career for a son, is it? But I had, so my dad's sister married a Marine, so kind of the family's had an awareness of like military anyway, and he kind of did a good job, I think, of diffusing the situation and being like, "There's no need to panic. Like the majority of people that start training don't pass out. Like there's a lot of ifs and buts and maybes that like nothing's set in stone yet anyway." And then I think as soon as I started training, whenever I went home or whenever we spoke, they could tell that like I just loved what I was doing, and kind of felt like that's what I was supposed to be doing. That's what I was meant to do. So at that point, I think they just kind of were happy that I was doing something that made me happy.
So can I just ask? So I think we were probably at Loughborough Uni at the same time. Like I think my first year was like 2012 to 2013.
So I was 2011, 2012 was first year.
Right. Okay.
So I was at Loughborough College because I missed my grades for the uni, but I was like, I need to be part of that training group.
Yeah.
So I was in Loughborough Uni halls, but I just went across the road for the lectures.
Yeah. You were literally just a year ahead of me.
Right.
So can I just double check? You said you basically didn't want to stick with the uni stuff because the training was too serious. So you decided that the Royal Marines was the way to go.
I think,
Have I got that right, or am I missing something here?
Yeah, when you put it like that, yeah, I think it's more a case of like,
do you know what? All this running, it's all right, but I'm not getting shot at.
Yeah. I think you'll know yourself from being at Loughborough. It's so, I don't know, like everyone who does a sport is so like incestuous and you don't go outside of that circle. So all I did was socialize with other, not even like athletics as a sport. You don't socialize with the whole of the athletics team. My life was literally the middle distance squad. And I think everyone gets so serious about it that they forget to actually enjoy what they're doing. And I remember thinking at one point there was a guy who he'd gone to Loughborough with a plan of making it as a middle distance runner, got his degree, still thought like he hadn't made it yet. It's like still time to make it, become part of like the I don't know, podium Olympic like development program or whatever. Did his masters, still wasn't where he wanted to be. Did a PhD, still wasn't where he wanted to be, but he was still working like I think he had a PhD and was working in Tesco in Loughborough because he was adamant that he was going to make it and be a pro athlete.
Sounds like me. I was working in Tesco in Loughborough. Who was it? Can you name them?
I don't want to name him. But I just remember thinking, like, that is not for me. Like, I've had enough of it. Everyone's like takes it far too seriously. And yeah, that itch had always been there, like to go join the Marines. So it's like, well, now's probably the time to scratch it. Yeah.
And
And
if we were talking about this before you came on, and we were just saying that, you know, if we were to somehow crowdfund and raise, like, you know, let's say a few hundred million, maybe £1 billion, and just give it to you, would you go and be Batman? Would you go and do that?
yeah.
Get on the phone to Elon, get Jeff Bezos on the call. Let's make it happen. We need to sort it. So I just want to say, there's when I was scrolled through like your Instagram profile, I was doing all the research for this and things like that, and came across a picture. And it's one of those things, you know, when someone says, "I'm a Royal Marine Commando," and you get a certain image that comes through your head, and it's literally you're sat in a tin shed or whatever it is. You've got your rifle, your shades are on, just chilling, looking cool as fuck. That's literally the kind of thing that I think, right, when you see Royal Marine Commando, that's what it is.
That is probably, I know the picture, and that's probably the coolest I'm ever going to look in my life.
I was going to say, you know, when you were going into the Royal Marine Commandos, like, and you have like an idea of how it's going to look, and, you know, the goal further down. Is that the kind of thing that you pictured?
Yeah. So, yeah, when you say about the Marines, that is immediately, I think, what you picture. And the reality is like completely different, because there's people of all shapes and sizes. When I started training, you have to be 65 kilos minimum body weight to like start training. And when I went and did my pre-joining fitness test, because I was just a skinny little middle distance runner, I actually weighed 63 kilos. So I had to have an extra 2 kilos before I started like training, before they'd let me start training, which is, yeah, mad.
I was going to say, so how different is the actual reality? Obviously, you've got the glamour side of it, but then obviously, you know, you're essentially going to war. You train to be a warrior. You train to be a fighter. You're going to be crawling through mud. You're going to get shot at. You're going to get blown up. You know, your mates are going to die, and possibly it's like your own life is on the line. It's not all sunshine and roses, is it? So how far removed from that picture is the actual reality? And what was your journey like going through the training process once you hit your 65 kilos? And did you have fun putting on the extra 2?
Oh yeah, I think when I started, so that would have been early 2013, and I started training in the October. Yeah. So I had ages to put the weight on, and I think I actually started training at about 70 kilos. And that was actually how I like first got into doing any kind of, I'd done some weights as a runner, but like just lower limb stuff really. And that was how I, like, my first foray into like weightlifting, bodybuilding style training, if you will, I guess. So yeah, I did enjoy it actually.
And what was the training like with the Marines from day one? What happens?
I mean, it's brutal. Like the first couple of weeks, like they call it shock of capture. So you're not actually getting anything. You're not doing anything physically. As long as you're reasonably fit, they're not asking you to do anything outrageous physically. But you're just getting fucked around constantly, like minimum sleep. And it's all, you kind of sleeping in the foundation block, which is like 60 blokes in one massive room. And you're getting taught how to administrate yourself, which literally is back to absolute basics. So from before you even get to folding and ironing kit and that kind of stuff, like a bloke shows you how to shower and genuinely shows you how to wash your bell end. Like it is like that. That's how stripped back it is. It's just like otherworldly.
Is that like a serious bit, not just like a jokey bit where they go, right, this is how you do it?
Oh no, like genuinely,
like
genuinely serious, yeah. And then show you how to shave, everything else. Probably don't touch a weapon or do anything that vaguely resembles being in the military for the first 4 weeks or something.
Right, I'm going to learn how to be a warfighting master. First off, you've got to learn how to wash your bell end. That's
and then
they don't put that on the TV advert.
No, they don't. It's not on the advert.
Popping up out of the water in someone's back garden. They don't go, hey, fellas, let's just rewind that a second.
Yeah. Like he didn't actually go on the exercise because he couldn't iron his pants right. And that's literally what it is. And you'd kind of spend hours preparing all your kit for like a locker inspection or something. And it's perfect. There's nothing wrong. But they're going to come and they're going to trash your locker and pull it all out, chuck it on the floor, and you're going to have to do it all again. And yeah, I guess it's that process of breaking you down and putting you in like a really uncomfortable position, like psychologically, couple that with being sleep deprived as well. I think the people that are going to quit, they want them to quit before they invest too much time in them, I guess.
I was going to, so what if any were the key lessons for you through that phase of the training other than learning how to wash your bell end?
To be honest, it was, I just wanted to keep my head down. Because as soon as you highlighted yourself as, like, if you fucked up once, maybe twice, like everyone's going to get at least one fuck up. But if you do it a couple of times and you then kind of stick your head above the parapet and you just become a target for the training team at that point.
Yeah.
So I just was like, first few weeks was desperately trying to be a grey man.
Were there any situations where you saw someone do something and you thought, ooh, wouldn't have done that?
Yeah, like there are probably loads of times, like throughout the whole of training. But I remember one lad, we're stood having a locker inspection, and the training team would get like right in your face and like basically tell you how shit you were. And and there's this one lad, he's so nervous, he's like started shaking. He's like, the guy on the training team's like, are you fucking shaking? And he's like, can you stop shouting at me, please? And I was like, oh no. Like, you could just see everyone around the room just like wanting the floor to swallow them up so they didn't have to be there. And I just remember the corporal going, sorry, say that again. And this lad almost on my bottom lip going, can you stop shouting at me? You're making me really nervous.
What reaction did that get?
I think the corporal was probably on the verge of like crying with laughter himself. So from what I remember, I think he just gave him like a look of sheer disgust and walked away from him, shaking his head. Like at the time, you're absolutely shit scared of these blokes, like your training team. And then you're looking back afterwards, I just think they must have been like in stitches every single day. Just like the stupid shit that people said when they're like a bit nervous or sleep deprived and confused or whatever. Yeah.
That's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Wow. I feel like there's certain things, there's just time and a place to not say those sort of things.
Do you know what? I'll tell you this. This is probably the best thing that happened in training that I thought I definitely wouldn't have done that. So it's probably our end of the first week of training, and you're doing loads of like drill. So you're on the parade square teaching you how to march, that kind of stuff. And then you're like stood to attention for ages, getting inspected, that kind of stuff. And you have a break midway through because it was a couple of hours. And just after we have this break, we're stood back to attention, and this one lad sticks his hand up, and the drill instructor like, yeah, what do you want? It's like, I need to go to the bathroom. He's like, are you fucking kidding me? You've just had a break. He's like, I really need to go. And he's like, you can go to the bathroom on your own fucking time. And like left him there. Like 5 minutes later, hand goes up again. And he's like, I really got to go. He's like, I told you, you could have gone in the break. You're on my time now. You're going to fucking stand there and wait. And then his hand goes up again a few minutes later. And drill instructor's like right in his face at this point and just looks down to see the bloke pissing himself stood to attention.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of disciplinary action taken from that, or what do you do? What happened then?
At that point, he basically thinned him out, so sent him back to the accommodation to change his pants. Like nothing came of it. Probably in hindsight, he'd have got in shit for not letting the lad go for a piss. But yeah, like nothing ever came of it other than the fact that he pissed himself and he was never allowed to forget it until he left training.
Was it like one of those moments where you've seen it happen and it's one of those times where you know you're not meant to laugh, but it's just really, really funny and just
Oh,
trying to
you
keep
could
straight
see
face?
like everyone, like you could see it just rippling around the parade square and everyone's shoulders going.
Brilliant. Absolutely love that.
And it was one of those as well where the drill instructor was a hilarious bloke. Basically told everyone while he was off changing his pants, no one can take the piss out of him for that. Like you can't rinse him for it. Like that's the end of it. So we were all like, yeah, fine, fair enough. He's had a bit of a rough day. The guy gets back on the drill square and the drill instructor immediately just rips into him and proceeded to do so for like the rest of the time before he quit training.
Wow. Class. Was there anything, so you said obviously about trying to keep your head down. Was there anything that you did that kind of brought attention to you, or?
So I was fortunate in a sense because I'd come from pretty much being like a full-time athlete. So I was really fit. I'd put a bit of weight on, but I could still run. Like I was still a really good runner at the time. So the first 9 weeks of training is like the gym phase, which is all about just making you fit and robust enough so that when you start getting smashed in the field or like outside on the assault course, that you're not going to get injured and break immediately. But because I was so fit coming into training, I think I highlighted myself maybe in a good way as being like the fittest bloke in the troop, which I think then it took a little bit of heat off me. And I wouldn't say I then got an easy ride because of it, but because I wasn't highlighting myself as a shithouse who couldn't keep up, they weren't then looking for other reasons to smash me and like give me, like you would call it a thrashing, basically either send you running or like a load of press ups or anything that they could think of to put you in physical distress. Because I was already fit, they weren't looking for a reason to give me any extra to do.
I was going to say, so in that first phase, is it literally just a case of they're looking for people that are possibly highlighting themselves as a weak link that, that are probably not the right fit to be there. So they're just trying to put as much pressure on them as possible to see whether they'll quit or whether they'll stick with it, so to speak.
Yeah, I think so. Like it's a 32-week training process. And it probably, I'm not sure exactly what it costs, but I know for a fact it'll cost a lot more to train a Marine than it would just to train like an infantry soldier in the army, for example. So there's probably an extent of it makes sense to weed out the people that aren't going to be there early before you spend more money training them. And as well, people will probably be a liability later on down the line in training and limit what they could teach to the rest of the section if you're constantly having to drag like dead weight with you.
Yeah, why they won't be giving you a weapon on day one before you've learned to clean yourself.
That's it. I think it was probably week 2 you first get your hands on a weapon, and even then it's only like before you do anything else with it, you're taught how to. Well, first you're taught to make it safe, make sure there's nothing in it, but then after that, it's how do you like clean, maintain it, not actually shoot it.
Yeah. And then from one of the things that I've gathered, I know because I've read quite a bit about like how the Navy SEALs work and through training and through their buds process and various things like that. And you mentioned like a lot of the attention to detail, like a lot of it is organizing your kit, learning how to clean yourself and keep everything tidy and, like you said, process yourself really. Like when you do that and then you have an inspection, how much of the mindset do you think carries over from just accepting that you might think you've got everything perfect, but someone somewhere along the line is going to come along, find a way to shit on you for no reason whatsoever, and then you've got to figure out how to deal with that? How important is that skill, either both as a soldier or as an elite athlete and doing what you do now?
I'd say for both, massively important. I think everyone knows that you make a plan how often, if you plan to do something like significant, could be in any walk of life, nothing ever goes exactly the way you've envisaged it, does it? And so, like to use another example, we've had like a massive kit inspection one evening, and the training team have decided beforehand, obviously, that we're not going to pass that inspection, whether or not you're immaculate or you aren't. And so they've come in, they've gone around. You live in training, once you get out of that first phase, you live in these like 4-story blocks. So there'd be my troop had the top 2 floors of this building. You've got a square kind of staircase going up the middle. So you could lean over the balcony and see right down to the bottom floor. So they then basically got everyone to one by one go into their locker, grab all of their kit, and you chuck it off the top balcony onto the floor in the middle. So it's falling down 4 flights of stairs. Once everyone's done that, everyone goes and gets their black water bottles, which are full of water, and you empty that over them. And then they've got us chuck in like laundry powder off the top. Just make an absolute mess of like 54, probably about 50 blokes kit on the floor, and then say, right, okay, you've got to have your lockers good to go again, ready for inspection at 5 a.m. And like you've already spent 6 hours cleaning all of your kit to get to that point, and it's absolutely soul destroying. But I think the people they're looking for are the ones who will just take it with a pinch of salt and be like, right, well, we haven't got a choice. Just get on with it and probably have a bit of a laugh about the fact that it's just happened and that's what you've got to do.
I was going to say, like, what do you think makes the difference in a person as to whether they can do that or whether they can't? Like, why do you think certain people aren't able to get over that little hurdle and just crack on with the job?
I think some people probably just take it as like a personal insult, rather like take it personally, like to heart, rather than. I think you've got to take a step back and think like, like when you're in training, it's easy to get stuck in like the washing machine, and day in, day out, you're just grafting and it feels like there's no end to it. And all you know is at the end, you want that green beret. And it's easy to see the training team as a bunch of cunts that are trying to stop you from doing that. But then if you take a step back and think about actually they're there to make sure that only the blokes that are worthy of getting it get that green lid at the end. So I think for me anyway, once I accepted that they could do anything to me and it wasn't going to break me because I knew I was there to get a green beret and they were there to make sure it was as hard as it needed to be for me to get it, then you just make peace with the fact that you just have to crack on and do it. And I think the ones that couldn't do that and just thought, like, why is this happening to me? Like, it's not fair. Like, it's probably not fair if you end up going on tour and getting shot at, but such is life if you want to join the Marines. So
Gonna say if that starts happening on tour, you can't just sit down, put your weapon down, pick up a sign, and go, "Why are you shooting at me?"
yeah, exactly.
Sounds very familiar to a lot of the clientele that we sometimes come across, or I know certainly have come across in the past, doesn't it, Chris?
Yeah, very much so. Just like a specific outlook and a way of viewing things that it's weird because it's almost like
It's the Balotelli effect, isn't it? It is the Balotelli effect.
Yeah, and it always happens to them. It's always the
Causes,
bad things happen to them.
it's funny, isn't it? Because you look at Mario Balotelli and you go, man causes his own problems, and then he pulls up his shirt, why always me? Well, have a think on that fella. Maybe sit down in a quiet room and meditate on it for a second.
So, how old were you at that stage, Ben? That was 2013, was it?
Yeah, so I joined 2013. I was 20 when I joined.
Okay, okay.
And
And
then
what was the majority of the rest of the blokes there then? Were they all similar age or?
I'd say so, ranging in age from like the youngest you could join at 16. And then probably the oldest guys there, early 30s.
Okay, yeah. So the only reason I asked that is because I always think something like that, like you just explained there, it's quite a sophisticated level of thought for a 20-year-old, for a 16-year-old for definite. I'm trying to imagine me when I was 20. Someone had done that to me. To be fair, I'd have probably been the guy like, can you stop shouting at me, please? That'd have been me. So, yeah. Okay, so you were 20 at that stage, and that lasted 32 weeks.
Yeah, so with like Christmas leave and Easter leave, it was so I went it was either very end of September or start of October. And then I passed out of training in the June 2014.
Okay, so was there ever a point? I feel like I already know the answer to this because you kind of touched on it already. But was there ever a point where you were like, "I'm not sure about this"?
Loads, like loads of times where I thought, fuck me, like this is the limit now. I don't know. I don't think there's anything left. But I'd be like, say on the final exercise you do, everyone who's like passed out as a Marine will know they call it killer yomp. So yomping is basically carrying your kit it's carrying all your kit across like Dartmoor, typically, if you're in the Marines. Not on paths, just the most boggy, horrible, nasty terrain, carrying like probably not far off 70 kilos at times if you've got like a machine gun or ammunition, batteries to carry. And yeah, so like killer yomp, it just goes on and on. You have no idea when you set off how far you're going. We were already 5 days into like a week-long exercise at that point. So you've slept maybe 3-4 hours, not a lot at all. So you're already absolutely goosed. And you just feel like the weight's crushing you every time every time I breathed out at one point, I felt like I was going to burst into tears. But I was just like, right, well, like quitting isn't an option. Like you can't, to me anyway, I can't quit until I've completed it. So like fine, get to the end of today and then if you really, really don't want to be here, you can leave. But I knew as soon as I got through it, I knew that that was never an option. I just kind of was delaying it in my head. It's almost like making a smaller goal, I guess. I would be like, right, next checkpoint, next checkpoint.
I was going to say, so like that, it's actually one of the questions I'd written down in terms of just overcoming quitting and having that feeling like at any point, and can happen in any situation when anyone does anything, really, doesn't it? Like even people day to day with their job. But I was going to say, there's a difference, isn't there, between the mentality of wanting to quit there and then versus and wanting it to end immediately, i.e., the quick way out, versus just wanting to get to the end. Would you say is that more the feeling that you had, where it's like just get to the end, like get to the end of this day as like the
Yeah.
only target that you set out? So how would you advise that people maybe even reframe that in their own mind? And like obviously everyone's desperate for something to end or for suffering to stop, kind of thing. How do you reframe that so you can keep pushing and you can actually get to the end rather than just going, right, that's it, down tools, stop here?
I think because it was something that meant so much to me. So to get, like, the whole time you're in training, it's like a big deal. Like a recruit can't touch a green beret until they've like earned the right to it and they pass out of training. So for me, it was all that was obviously that green beret symbolized something that was like, it meant so much to me that I was willing to just do whatever it took to get there. And if that meant, right, okay, I get to the next checkpoint, I'm like 2 hours closer to getting there. Like, this process is 8 months long, 32 weeks. Tick the days off, it's one less day. And I kind of got to a point where I realized that there are obviously times that were horrendous and you hated every second of it. But a lot of the time, despite being exhausted, broken, it's like, this is class. Like, I absolutely love this. So I guess if it's something, if people don't want to suffer for their like goal or whatever it is they're striving for, but they're not willing to, then probably worth readdressing whether or not is that actually what you want. I think people maybe convince themselves that, oh, I want to do X, Y, and Z, without sitting down and thinking about why they want to achieve it and like why it's important to them.
Which I think that's probably a good way of circling back to when you were at university and you switched after that first year going into your second, and you then decided you didn't want to stay in the uni life, you didn't want to continue down that path, and you made the switch to the Royal Marines.
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, I use that example of the bloke who had a PhD but was still working in Tesco because he was adamant that he was going to make it as a full-time athlete. Like, what meaning? There's no meaning in that. Like, having put all that effort in to get a PhD and all that, like, I don't know. It's just, to me, there was no value in it. And when I thought about joining the Marines, it was because my parents are going to grow old in this country and die in this country. When I have a family myself, they're going to grow up in this country. And I just had like a feeling of that we expect it to be a safe place for that to happen. But that like safety, I guess, or that safety doesn't come without people being willing to go and do their bit to make it happen. So that was kind of what drove me to join.
And then while you were going through that, I mean, you were saying like towards the end, it's the meaning that kind of pulls you through and keeps you going. And somehow, some way, they managed to get what is essentially, it's just a green beret, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
Little green hat. But they've managed to get that to have such a meaning in your own mind, like that emotional a mental attachment to it, to the point where you are literally willing to go through hell to get it. Like, how did they actually create that? Like, how did that happen? What was the process of that? Like, did you go in there from day one and just think, God, I've got to get that green beret, I've got to get that green beret? Or was that something that kind of evolved over time as they pushed you through stuff?
Yeah, I think you go in thinking, yeah, I want that green beret, but I don't think until you've been through it, you can appreciate what it takes to actually get there. And I think the more hardship you went through and were still there and like remained in the process, I think the more value kind of became attached to that beret, because you've now suffered so much for it, and you can see exactly why it is so difficult. And like the adverts for the Marines back in the days, I think they probably don't do it anymore because it's not very inclusive, but it used to say like 99.9% need not apply. And I think
it's definitely true though, isn't it? Like, it really is true.
Yeah, 100%.
So even out of the people that did apply, like when you were there, what was the actual attrition rate? How many people actually passed through your course?
I can't remember the exact numbers, but day one of training, we had 60-ish blokes. And then people get injured and it's called back trooped. So if you fail something, you can get back trooped. So you join the troop 2 weeks behind you, or if you get injured, you'd go and rehab it, and then you'd come into mainstream training as another troop kind of gets to the point in training that you were at. So I passed out as an original in my troop, and I think we had 14 out of the original 60.
Wow.
And the numbers, I couldn't tell you how many of the original 60. Sorry, I just got a really loud plane coming past. Yeah, I couldn't tell you how many of the ones that didn't pass out as originals still passed out, just in a different troop, and how many actually just left altogether. But obviously that's like a significant rate of attrition, way over half.
I was going to say, because I always think it's slightly similar in elite sport, but elite sport's like it's a bottleneck where there are only X number of seats at the table, whereas obviously in the military, I think there's never enough.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously, like, never enough actual quality people involved for what's actually required. But I think the payoff in elite sports probably significantly higher. Would you say, especially like certain sports?
Slightly.
So there's a lot more pull to that. So obviously there's a massive bottleneck there. What do you think? Is there much of a difference mentality wise that you would say is required to get to that level, or even passing through in the military? Because I think like we spoke to Nick, didn't we, last week on the podcast, and he was kind of talking about his mentality. He goes into it with a hunter's mentality, where it's essentially go out there, you kill or be killed kind of thing. Is that the kind of thing that you have to have?
To an extent, I would say yes, but then also you're like you could be the fittest bloke in the world, like most intelligent, but if you can't work in a team, there's no fucking place for you in the military at all. And I think that again is probably what made getting that green lid so, it's part of what made it such like a massive thing, is that you've literally gone through hell with the blokes that are like next to you. So then when you go on to your unit or wherever else, anyone, whether they've been they could have been in the Marines for like 10 years before you get there, but they know that you're held to the same standard as them, and that they can, in effect, that's how you could put your life into someone else's hands without ever having met the bloke, because he's like earned the right to wear that that green lid. And I think you can't do that on your own.
Yeah. And did you, because obviously coming from a very individual sporting background as a middle distance runner, did you find that like quite easy to slot in as part of a team and fit into that mold?
I think it's kind of it's a difficult process for everyone, especially early on in the process, because you've just been thrust into that environment. There's the whole shock of capture thing going on, and then you're expected to work together as a section with maybe 8 or 10 blokes that you've only known for 5 minutes, and you're all exhausted and under loads of psychological stress. And so naturally some people, like, yeah, there's arguments or you don't gel and whatever else. And I think as time goes on and that group gets whittled down, you're left with the guys that work well together as a group.
Get rid of the incompetence. For me, there's nothing that irritates me more than just people who are inadequate and incompetent.
Yeah. And as well, it sounds bad, but like there could be 8. By the time we get to the later stages of training, you've got 8 blokes in your section who you know really, really well. You all get along, you work well together. And then you could pick up a back trooper from a previous troop who's failed an exercise, and they have to then try and come and work as part of that unit that you've formed. And quite often there was, like, rightly or wrongly, there'd be a lot of like resentment towards that person, and like you don't want someone new fucking up your routine and your processes. So I think like our group that I passed out with in my section, we all held each other accountable, pulled each other up when you needed it. And I guess that's no one of us like made it through training as an individual. You get through as a section.
I was going to say, like, that's something that, like, team sports, obviously you've got new people coming into the team all the time, and I think that's one of the challenges for the new person coming in, isn't it? Like, no matter how competent they are or what they've done before, like, they're coming into it, especially if they're coming into an environment where nobody knows them. Like, you are starting from ground zero, and in a team, when building trust is kind of like the big thing, which obviously I mentioned the green beret is kind of the signifier of you can trust this person because you know what they've done, they've been through the same as you. Like, it cannot be easy for someone coming into that environment without that level of trust for everyone around them to depend on them.
No, definitely not. And I think I experienced it myself. Like when I passed out of training and you go on to join your unit, you generally go in like a 1 or a 2. There might only be one of you in the troop that you end up in, or the squadron that you end up in. And then, yeah, you've got your green lid, and yeah, they can trust you to do the basics of being a soldier. But you then need to, I guess, earn the trust all over again. So it's being willing to turn up and make wets, like tea, coffee, for the indefinite future until another new lad turns up to take the responsibility on. And like you've got, I think for me anyway, I turned up and just showed willing. Like if there was a job that needed doing, if it was a shit job that no one who'd been there a while and was more experienced wanted, like make sure I was seen to do it. And then you then get accepted because they realize that I was willing to be selfless and do stuff for the team, if you will.
It's interesting, that, isn't it? Just willing to be helpful actually gets people to like you and trust you a bit more, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Strange, that.
Mental.
So actually, if we were to, this might be a bit of a spoiler here, but if we fast forward from that, you actually became a squad leader, didn't you?
Yeah, so I was promoted for about 18 months to Lance Corporal, and so in the role that I was in, it was like I was operational within the UK. I was lucky enough to kind of serve my time during peacetime, which I get it's part of the reason that I left, to be fair, which I guess we can touch on in a little bit. But for a soldier in peacetime, I was in an operational job involved with like nuclear security. So my job was like a team commander of a vehicle. So I was responsible for an armored vehicle, all the weapon systems in it, and 3 blokes. So yeah, I think I forgot what the question was, but
He didn't even ask you a question. He just went, right, we're going to go spoiler alert. Skipping ahead, you were a team leader.
So
yeah,
I was just leading on from the fact that
yes, I was a team
mentioned
leader.
about
Correct.
so I made the link with just obviously you explaining there, like you were showing that you were willing to go out there and get stuff done and be selfless and do things for the unit and for the other guys as well. And then I was making the connection. You actually ended up becoming a squad leader by obviously doing those specific things that build repertoire with everyone else as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's probably one of the main reasons why I was chosen for promotion. That I was extremely professional, and how I approach training now, and like Iron Man, and wanting to be like the best, wanting to be as good as I physically can be. I kind of had the same approach to being a soldier, in that I wanted to be the best soldier that I could be.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm actually intrigued to ask is, so they've got the commando values and stuff, haven't they? Do you think you succeeded and have done the things you've done and still do the things you do now because like you did well with that training process because you were already kind of those things and fit that mold? Or do you think you were just, because of how much you wanted it, you were so susceptible to learning from that environment and taking on those values? Does that question make sense? Do you think you were already those things, so you did well, or you were just open to learning those things?
I think it's probably a bit of both. I think a lot of people maybe go into training having like some kind of something like the qualities that are required, but don't necessarily embody them. And I think that probably is like a good indicator of someone who could potentially make like a good Marine. But I think it's instilled into you throughout the process, and you kind of pick it up and it becomes more ingrained in you, like the further you go through the process. But like the main one, because I'd always been an athlete, so I was used to kind of physical hardship, and like the most important value, I guess, is cheerfulness in the face of adversity.
I was going to say I've just pulled them up now, so I've got a list of them here. So for anyone that's listening, I'll save them a bit of time. So the Royal Marines collective group values: you've got excellence, integrity, self-discipline, humility, courage, determination, unselfishness, and cheerfulness. Then individual commando spirit, the 4 elements of commando spirit: courage, determination, unselfishness, and cheerfulness in the face of adversity. So they're all the values. You've got your group values and your individual ones. And I think I know where you go a little bit with this in terms of cheerfulness in the face of adversity. It's the point where, like, you know, when if you're running for an incredibly long amount of time or suffering to a ridiculous level that you might not have felt before, and then something else starts hurting and you just, for some reason, just decide to laugh about it. Is it that kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly that. And I remember being on like survival exercise on Dartmoor. It was the week before Christmas leave. It was raining / hailing sideways. hadn't eaten for 24 hours, hadn't slept for probably 48 hours. And we were all like on the verge of breaking. Like everyone's sat there like properly body popping, shaking. You got one of the training team who we rinsed, and like we rinsed for it afterwards when we all passed out. Like stood in front of everyone. His lips were blue and he couldn't speak without his teeth chattering. And he's like, lads, it's not even cold. And then afterwards, when we passed out, he was like, yeah, lads, I've never been that cold in my life. It was horrendous. And we were building like survival shelters, and there's me and one of the other lads. We found like this massive area of like really spongy moss. And we didn't have any tools or anything, and we were literally like ripping this moss up and rolling it with our bare hands to bring back to our shelter to like make some insulation. But our hands weren't working. Like we literally were like, it's like watching Edward Scissorhands try and like roll up some moss probably. And we just had this moment where we both just like looked up at each other and both just burst out laughing, like absolutely creasing with laughter. And I think it's just being able to be in that kind of shit, horrible situation and see the funniness in it, and like the absolute someone looking at that from the outside with no idea of context would just be like, what the fuck is going on here?
I was going to ask, so like my next question was going to be like, in terms of cheerfulness in the face of adversity, how? And I think when you look at that situation, you've got two incredibly competent people, not just people, but soldiers, elite soldiers that are capable of doing pretty much anything. But at the current moment in time, they're currently unable to roll up a thing of fucking moss because they're that cold. So they're just acting like a couple of retards that just are unable to do anything.
Yeah.
Is that where the humor comes from? Like, just like where does it come from? Like, how do you manage to develop that cheerfulness in situations like that?
I think it's just
do you have to drop the ego?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Like no ego whatsoever. I think you just have to accept. It comes probably from accepting how shit the situation is and how ridiculous it is, and that there's fuck all you can do about it, and your choices are either just do the best you can and have a bit of a laugh about it, or like have a cry and a full-on like mental breakdown about it.
Were there any other situations where you thought like this is properly naff?
Oh, loads. Like, yeah, loads. Probably, I don't know, the specific ones. Probably getting thrown in the lock when I got up to my unit, and on like my first week there, someone's jacket had gone missing. And as you touched on with those values, like integrity is a massive one. I don't really know what had happened. Someone's jacket had gone missing, and the theory was that someone had pinched it. And I'd arrived at the unit after this had happened, so it like definitely couldn't have been me. And just remember getting woken up at like 6 a.m, ran down from our accommodation out of the gates of camp to a ramp into the lock, and we just fully dressed in all your rig straight in the lock. And I was like, I don't even know why I'm in here. I'm just treading water in freezing cold water for no reason whatsoever. Cheers.
Oh, how long were you left in there for?
Not, I say not long, maybe like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that.
Long enough for hypothermia.
Yeah.
You're just like, the rest of the lads are in here, so I'm going in as well.
Yeah.
Was there not even like any questions, like you're there treading water and they're like, so you're in here because you've stolen a jacket?
Oh yeah, well at that point someone starts then reading the riot act, and this is what we can expect for the foreseeable future until whoever's responsible like turns themselves in.
Wow.
And did anybody turn themselves in?
Nobody turned themselves in, and eventually, like that was maybe on the Monday, Tuesday morning, and eventually, like an end to the shenanigans got called on the Friday. So, I mean, I'm not convinced the jacket was stolen, to be honest. I don't know. But yeah.
So take us through sort of like the rest of your time from passing through your training in the Royal Marines, and then where you evolved from there.
So I spent probably best part of 5 years in the Marines. Like I said, I was in an operational role in the UK, which was great because we were operational. It was peacetime. A lot of the units, like the main fighting units, didn't have the same budget, so they had limited kind of training time on the ranges. Because we were operational, that wasn't really an issue. So if we weren't on an op within the UK, we'd be training either on the ranges or somewhere else. And I got 2 trips to America to go training out there as well. So like,
how different was that when you were out there training? Because I know, like budget in the military is like a huge thing, and the Americans just seem to have cash to burn. And
yeah, it's next level out there. The second time I went, we went and trained with some US Marines that were in like a similar role. They're in a similar role to us out there, and just the amount of ammunition that we had. Like when we were in the UK, if we were on the ranges, I felt like we always had like quite a lot of ammo, and these guys were bringing out what we would use in a week, and we'd get through it in a morning, and then they'd be like the same again in the afternoon. It was just like crazy. But yeah, so some great experiences, and in the end, I kind of left. I alluded to it a bit before, but like I said, we were in peacetime, and I felt like while I was still doing an operational job, it wasn't what I'd signed up to do. And I guess if you were like a professional footballer or a professional rugby player, and you trained 5-6 days a week, how long would it be before you're like ready to play a match? And I know I'm making very light of actually going on tour and being in an actual conflict, but that's kind of the closest analogy that I can get. And it was just a case of I felt like I'm training, doing all this training, but I'm not going to play in the game.
Yeah, no, that actually makes quite a lot of sense. In that respect, then, do you feel like you actually did scratch the itch that you were looking for?
Yeah, I think so.
Chris, don't try and get him to go back in and join again. He's out now.
So
by the way, Ben, sounds like you didn't scratch the itch. Go over there.
Yeah. But no, I think it forms a massive part of who I am, and like my identity still now. But at the same time, like I wouldn't go back in now. Unless, I'll rephrase, I wouldn't choose to go back in now, but if a situation arose, obviously there's like lots going on globally. If a situation arose where we might, like a world war type scenario again, or anything that required like some level of conscription, I'd be like straight back in 100% if the need was there.
Do you think something like that's going to happen?
No, I can't see it happening. But if the need was there, then yeah. Because for me, my reasons for joining in the first place would still be relevant, in that I feel like I need to do my bit to make the world, this country, a safer place for like parents to grow old and like a family at some point to grow up.
That's class.
So yeah, I left in April, May 2018, and went. I mean, I adjusted badly initially, and then went to uni in the September that year. Did sports science, and then kind of the rest is almost just been triathlon since then.
I'm going to say, so when you left in 2018 and then you went back to uni, you said that you adjusted badly in the first place. What was that transition like in terms of coming back to just being a normal civilian again?
It was tough, I think, because, well, for several reasons, I guess. My whole identity revolved around the fact that I was a Marine. And then I kind of had, I don't know, if maybe like an issue with authorities, maybe. Yeah, that's probably the best way of phrasing it. Like I worked doing like a few various things. Like I did some outdoor education with kids until I went back to uni. Worked at a gym at Maisca College, a few other bits. And I think my issue was around like the competence of the people who I was dealing with, and feeling that they were incompetent and shouldn't be in the position that they were in. And I was kind of, yeah. And as well, when people would get, like now, you can ask Lonnie and probably Chris, when you see me at the gym, I'm pretty laid back now. Like I'd say I'm pretty much horizontal, like so laid back. But yeah, I think I was, because I've kind of come to terms with it now, but it bothered me when people would get so stressed and worked up about normally job related stuff, like it's the end of the world. And like for me now, I'm in a really good position with work and really enjoy what I do. But at the end of the day, I know, like, look, we're in sports science here. Like if we don't collect data from such and such with his mouth guard today, no one's going to die. No one's getting hurt. And I think it was just that I felt like at 21, 22 years old, I probably had more responsibility than most people will in their lifetime. And I just felt like, I don't know, an injustice that some people were in positions of authority that I didn't think they should have been in. And that's not with where I'm at now with work. That was kind of like where I was doing this outdoor education stuff and like working part-time at the gym at Maisca College as well.
So one of the key things that I think I noted there was that your issue was, well, like with your general identity in terms of who you were. Like you said, like you were a Marine. And how did you kind of adapt your identity to be able to then cope with fitting in with normal life? Like, was that something you thought about and played on, and you had to redefine who you were or who you were going to be as a person now moving forwards? Or did you even think about it? Like, was it something that just naturally transitioned over time?
I think I realized that my identity didn't need to change. Like I wasn't in the Marines anymore, but the same values applied to like non-military life as well.
Yeah.
Whether or not other people chose to apply the same values to their life which was probably what got me so annoyed and like frustrated me so much with transitioning back to civilian life, was that people weren't holding themselves to the same level. And I think just appreciating that, like, they don't have to. It's fine. I can't control like what kind of shit standards people want to live their lives by. What I can control, like what I want to do and what I think's important. So, and then at that point, I think that's probably where I managed to transition from being like really frustrated and angry and like in a bit of an identity crisis to probably being like one of the most chilled out, laid back people in like a very, very short space of time.
So it's interesting that
just went, fuck it.
it's interesting that with, in terms of, you know, an identity, we're talking about an identity crisis and a transition. At no point did you feel the need to become like, let's say, a walrus or a penguin or a, you know, or a fucking cow or anything like that. You know, you just decided that you weren't going to change who you were because there was nothing wrong with that. All you were going to do was choose how to apply your values in day-to-day life. That's very interesting. I feel like that's something that a few other people should possibly consider before going through major, long-lasting changes.
Yeah.
Chris just sat nodding quietly. He knows what I'm saying. He knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, going on from that, obviously you've gone back to uni, gone into sports science, and you're now working on. I think this is absolutely mint. I feel like there's loads involved in this mouthguard technology, because I heard about these like it must have literally been about 2 weeks ago, where I think there were a couple of professional rugby union sides that were using them. Saracens, maybe one of them. Talk us through sort of like the mouthguard technology and what you're up to now.
So, yeah, I mean, work for sports science company, and the company kind of was born out of creating a solution to measure impact data in rugby union. That kind of evolved as time's gone on, and we've moved into other fields as well. Like there was work done in Premier League football, and now we're doing a lot, like I said, in the combat space. Yeah, I mean, the company Sport and Wellbeing Analytics, the product that you've mentioned, the instrumented mouthguard, is Protect. But as well as that, we are a sports data science company. Like the instrumented mouthguard was like a means to get hold of some data that is difficult to get any other way. So yeah, I guess it's about kind of like harnessing the power of technology to improve athlete like welfare, performance, and kind of work in the entertainment space as well.
Do you want to go into the entertainment space a little bit? Because I find this fascinating in terms of, obviously, I understand how we need to, like, my role as an S&C coach, we're collecting data all the time, looking at how much distance athletes are covering, high intensity running, being able to tailor their recovery. Obviously, that's a massive part of the mouthguards and what they do in terms of monitoring head collisions and potential concussions and how intense a session was with respect to, you know, brain impact or head impact. How does this then filter into the entertainment and the experience for fans?
So
potentially.
So I guess if you're collecting the data anyway, in the same way that you are with GPS, for like the running demand, like if we think of rugby, for example, you could use mouth guard data as a member of performance staff in the exact same way that you might use GPS data, so we can understand what the match demand is and what players in a certain position are exposed to over the course of a game in terms of the like frequency, intensity, and distribution of impacts. And then we can then use that when we're kind of looking at training prescription to make sure that what we're doing in training is adequately preparing the athletes to go and play that game. If we're capturing that data, what else can it be used for? So my example being like, could we have live in a rugby match, for example, you see a big tackle and then when there's a slow-mo a few seconds later, and we have like live on screen, like intensity of that impact.
That'd be just sick. Like, what would be the measurement?
So I guess
boom factor.
Yeah, exactly. So
whiplash effect. Like, what would we call it? Like, I feel like for this to be like ultra massive, you got to Americanize the shit out of this. So what are you going with?
Yeah, exactly. So you've got like, in terms of what we actually collect is linear acceleration and rotate, like angular velocity, but neither of them are Americanized enough. Like,
won't look good on a big screen in the Dallas Cowboys Stadium. That
it won't at all. To be fair, for American football, whiplash effect's got to be a good one, hasn't it?
What you could do is really bamboozle them by showing them some sort of equation, which is sort of like the linear velocity, and what was the other one? Was it angular?
Linear acceleration and angular velocity.
Sorry, I got those two mixed up. So yeah, you could show them the equation for that. Somehow multiply it together to get your whatever the Americanized.
I think like before in like in that kind of a setting, we maybe called it like a contact load or something like that, or an impact load. But yeah, you could definitely jazz it up 100%.
There absolutely needs to be a poll at the end of this podcast with different ideas for names for what that would be.
Yeah, we'll have to do that. We will have to do that. And then you could just have like, if there is like a marker for, right, this person is definitely going to be concussed after this kind of force impact. Like, I know it's difficult to say because everyone's going to have their own mitigating factors as to what limits a concussion, like neck strength and maybe even brain size. But like, if you could have a bit where it's like literally like RIP this person, like they are gone, they are out of the game or out the fight kind of thing. Like, pretty brutal, but fuck it, why not entertain the people?
I think the thing with it is we would never say that we're able to like prevent or identify a concussion. But what you could do certainly in like a rugby scenario is completely different if you're in a combat scenario, like, yeah, admittedly, but you've got physios going onto the field anyway. If you see someone's taken a big knock, you could probably have a little look at the system and be like, oh yeah, like that was a sizable impact, and just say to the physio, like, look, when you're next on field, do an on-field check, make sure such and such is all right.
Yeah, so I know we're talking about the entertainment factor here, but obviously very, very serious and actually useful implications as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Is it the same kind of technology that I think they were starting to demonstrate and use it in the World Cup with, like, actually in the ball?
Oh, right, okay.
Where they were tracking ball speed, like shot velocity, and whether it's even being touched. Because I know there was a situation where Cristiano Ronaldo was trying to claim a goal that he never got a touch. Adidas were like, our ball says no, he didn't.
Right.
Is it the same sort of technology as what's involved in there, or?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm not like I don't follow football, so I've not read anything about the ball. I imagine it must be pretty similar. Yeah.
I imagine it probably will be. That's pretty sick. Anyway, like I look forward to seeing what we can actually come up with. What would you call it, Chris?
What would I call it?
Mm.
What the impact score?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I need some time to think about that. I need some time to think about that. What would you call it?
I already said it'd be a boom factor, wasn't it?
Boom factor.
I don't know. That was just a first preliminary idea.
It's fair. You could have the exact same thing with different names in different things. Like you could have it named one thing in rugby, you could have it named one thing in combat sports, another thing in a TV show if it went on there. Get it on UK Gladiators.
Get them
Yes.
wearing it on like Total Wipeout or something.
Yes. There are some like pretty serious, like I'm sure some people on there come off really badly afterwards. Like there are some really not good collisions on that. You know when they're bouncing over the red balls or they get wiped out from a pole that's spinning round. That kind of thing. That'd be savage. So like I know we've barely even spoken about the triathlons and the ultras and things like that. Like what are you up to at the minute? What are you training for?
So as I was leaving Marines in 2018, I kind of was like, right, just wanted something stupid, really. Like the most stupid thing I could think of to have a do at. And I was like, Ironman, it's in Bolton, it's local, I'll have a go at that. Why not? So like cuffed the training, tore my calf like 4 miles into the run and was just like, yeah, persistent enough to run another 22 miles on it and properly fuck it up, good style. But yeah, I caught the bug, I guess, after that and started doing more training myself as I was like, studying sports science, kind of doing my own training. And yeah, then in maybe March 2020, realized that even though in theory, like I had a good idea of how to train someone in terms of like how to improve the like energy system work and that kind of stuff. I just found that personally, if I'm left to my own devices, I will just go like more and more and harder and just keep putting myself into a hole. So yeah, in March I started working with my coach, Tony Cullen, and yeah, that's when I sort of started taking it pretty seriously. I think I'd been aware beforehand that like pro triathletes and the top like amateur triathletes may be training 20 between 20 30 hours a week, and I was like, right, I've got to go straight in at that. Whereas actually Tony's been amazing at giving me the triathlon specific stuff that I would never have thought of doing. I'd have just ridden at like a set percentage of my heart rate or like my maximum threshold power and not think to do the stuff like different cadence drills on the bike and that kind of stuff. And now it's been like a 3-year process where now I'm actually consistently, maybe from like January onwards, training 20 plus hours a week. Yeah, so yeah, had some good success last year, won my age group at Ironman Copenhagen, and then won European long distance championships 3 weeks later in like Almere in the Netherlands. And then yeah, this year I'm racing Ironman UK again, first weekend in July, and then I'm going back to European Championships again in September.
That's absolutely class. We will definitely, if we're able to, we will definitely have to get you back on at some point to talk specifically about triathlons and tri training.
Yeah,
Sounds
I think
good.
we'll delve a little bit further into, I know we touched on some mindset stuff, but we'll delve a little bit further into that and nutrition and things like that as well. I know, so obviously I talked to Alanis at work and she was saying that you eat a lot of food, which I can imagine. And in fact, I think I recall seeing. So obviously, you work your job and you do your Ironman training. Is it right? You used to spend like 2 hours first thing in the morning, like 4 o'clock on the bike.
So before I started where I am now, sometimes I'd be in at Myesco opening up at like 6:45 a.m. And sometimes I'd have been on the turbo trainer in the garage at like 4 a.m. to get done for 6 to then get showered and drive down to work. Thankfully now I'm in a really good position where 95% of the time I work from home. So I can train before I start in the morning. I can get a run or a swim in at lunchtime, and then I can train again in the evening too. And just, without having to do the stupid 4 a.m. starts. But yeah, that was like a regular in sort of 2021 maybe.
Yeah. So we'll definitely have to get you back on to go through some of that stuff, because it reminds me of have you ever read Relentless by Tim Grover?
No.
So Alex, you actually put me onto this, and it just makes me think, like, the stories that you've told, and obviously what I know of you anyway and what you do and things like that. Like, there's certain people who just get things done. And so Alex, I had a conversation with Ben, I think it was last week actually, Ben, where you were talking about kind of the problems that you had with that transitionary period coming out of the Marines. And you were saying about how you were very used to, if a person told you, yes, I will get that done, you were very used to going about your day and coming back to find that that thing had been done. And then coming out of that, coming into the real world, and the real world, like people who aren't getting shot at and dealing with stuff like that. That thing that they said they would do has not been done, and still has not been done, and still has not been done. So I think, Ben, my interpretation of you, and I said this in our intro as well, is like you're very much one of those people who, like, you will just get it done, and it's not a question of, well, what if this happens, and well, what if this happens, and well, what if this happens. It's like it's going to get done. It doesn't really matter. So we definitely need to delve further into that and help some people out, because I know a lot of people obviously struggle with that. It's like overcoming obstacles and barriers and stuff like that. And I know you've got some gold dust in your head. So yeah, that'd be class.
Yeah,
we'll definitely have you back on to talk just pure training, physical fitness. Well, I think today's been absolutely amazing. It's been great to speak to you. Before you go as well, I know Chris mentioned the book Relentless there, and I did give you a heads up on this. What top 3 book recommendations have you got for everyone?
So I'd say first one's kind of 2. They go hand in hand: Extreme Ownership and Dichotomy of Leadership.
Wise choices.
Love that.
Yeah. The second one, Can't Hurt Me, David Goggins.
Yeah.
Just think it's like a really good it's like, for someone who hasn't maybe been in the military, it's maybe a good way of, I guess, a good way of conveying, like, the fact that your mind's going to give up way before your body does, and actually you're capable of way more than what you thought was possible. And then the last one is Sapiens. I can't remember who wrote that.
Oh, I've heard of Sapiens. I haven't read it though.
It's
Yuri. Is it Yuri? It's a unorthodox name.
Yeah, it was written first in it was first written in Hebrew.
Yuval Noah Harari.
Yeah. So it's basically kind of a brief history of humanity, from our like evolutionary roots to kind of how we've become the complex beings that we are now, and how not only how we've evolved like physiologically, but also like as a society, like built a society as well. Yeah, really interesting read.
I like that. Eclectic mixture there. Well, before you go, we've got some questions that we do need to ask you just quickly. Obviously, you've been through all that amazing stuff that you have done, all the great things that you've done. But importantly, we need to understand, what do you think about trannies in sport?
Yeah, it's a can of worms, isn't it?
We nearly made it through. We nearly got there.
I was on the turbo trainer last week and I listened to you talking to Nick about it. I think, yeah. I saw a meme actually today that I think was accurate, and it was a picture of the Tour de France peloton. And at the front of it, there's this big, like, massive, like, stereotypical American biker on a Harley with like the leather vest on and big old beard, basically saying, yeah, I identify as a cyclist, so this is okay.
Oh man,
I would, yeah, I absolutely would defend anyone's right to do whatever they want to do. Like, if you want to identify as a female, a male, like whatever it has, you know, as long as you're not hurting anyone by doing what you're doing, like, yeah, I would defend your right to do whatever it is you want to do or identify as. But I think in sport, if you are biologically a male and you think that I'll identify as a female and I can still compete as a female, like, that is then hurting someone else, whether you're taking prize money away from them, exposure that could lead to sponsorships. Yeah. And that's just in like an individual sport, like an endurance sport. I'm thinking of like triathlon, running, whatever else, not to mention like how dangerous it could be in something like combat sports.
Yeah. Well, I think that has happened, hasn't it?
Yeah. It was, I think you were saying last week, maybe.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, triathlon, I think, got it right quite early and said, you can now race either as female or it's an open category.
Yeah.
So like, I think they did a really good job. It was like the case that you mentioned last week was the cycling one, I think, where a trans woman won a stage or won like a UCI sanctioned race in America. And I think they only have to
Mexico, I think. Yeah.
So for cycling, I think they just had to suppress their testosterone below 2 whatever units of measure it is. Is it millimoles per liter or something? Yeah. They had to keep it below that for 12 months, 2 years, something like that. But like, if you've undergone puberty as a male, you, regardless of what your testosterone levels is, you have a male's bone structure and physiology.
Bigger hands, more upper body strength, increased leg mass, increased muscle mass, bigger heart, bigger lungs.
Yeah. And
structure.
I know that the thing has to be, maybe if you've undergone male puberty before you've transitioned, then you can never compete as a female. But who's in their right mind is going to allow someone to transition before they're at an age where they've gone through puberty, would be my next question.
So let's hope. Yeah,
this is an interesting, because I actually pulled this up before. I came across this just before we came on to record this. Florida lawmakers have now passed a bill banning puberty blockers and sex reassignment surgeries for children. Right? The big thing that I can't get my head around is why that is acceptable for children in the first place. Like,
why it needed banning.
Who is conducting these experiments on little kids? Like, just let them grow up, be what they want to be, and, you know, whatever their identity is at the end of that developmental phase, whatever their values are. You know, we discussed this when you came out the military. You know, you identify as a Royal Marine, you are a fucking Royal Marine, but find a different way to apply your values and life changes.
Yeah.
I can't believe we nearly made the entire way through without bringing it up. But there we go. Anyway,
that was very.
Any more questions for him?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we've got two more yet. That was very nicely navigated, by the way. I feel like you did that in a way that gave very good points without offending anyone. So good work. That is more than I can say for me and Alex have done so far. So the second one is, what do we think about keto for performance?
Keto in general, like if you were to go on a full ketogenic diet, can literally get fucked. Yeah, I've not got any time for that. I know I won't name them, but I know of someone who claims that the only way that they can ever lose weight is when they're on keto. They obviously haven't grasped the calories in, calories out equation, and that the reason that they're probably losing weight when they're on keto is because they've cut out one entire food group. I think
Donuts.
yeah, but I think there's uses for, again, it's not keto, but there's uses for doing some kind of fasted training if you're a endurance athlete. So for me, like if I'm going to do a 10-hour race, I'm going to run out of carbs at some point. But if I can utilize fats earlier on in the race, I'm going to delay the point where I run out of carbs. But it's got to be done in the right way. I know, like I've heard people saying, "Oh yeah, I'm doing a fasted run or a fasted ride in the morning, so I'm going to eat a shitload tonight," rather than having a meal that's like high in fats and protein the night before rather than carbs, and then in the morning have something like eggs and omelette or whatever, and then doing something low intensity. I think, yeah, people obviously hear snippets of what pro athletes do and think, oh yeah, I should do that, and don't really understand.
Well, I remember, was it a seminar a while ago, and the guy that was presenting actually did some of the nutrition for, or he knew the person that ran the nutrition for Team Sky, and I think on Chris Froome's rest day, he showed an example of what he was eating, and it was like, oh my god, Chris Froome's competing in the Tour de France with no carbs, and it's like, no, you fuckwit. He's literally having salmon and greens for breakfast, and then the rest of his food and everything else through the rest of the day is tailored toward racing. Like, that's just one small snippet and one small meal. He's not competing on no carbs whatsoever. That definitely, what you brought up there is 100% something we'll definitely go into next time we have you on as well, in terms of training fasted and just fueling for performance. So hold on to that thought.
Will do.
Lovely. So the last one was about Scientology. Do you know much about Scientology? Are you interested by Scientology?
I remember watching a documentary on it a few years, like I say a few years, probably going on 10 years back now. What are my thoughts on it?
Yeah, what's your thoughts? Tell us about it. Is
Just a
it for
bit
you?
mental, really, isn't it? Like, I feel like someone's had I don't know. I mean, I've never taken any hallucinogenic, but I feel like someone's taken a mad hallucinogenic, and then when they've come back round, they've been like, I'll tell you what. Like that's how like Scientology's come about.
It's an interesting theory. We'll have to look into that. The only reason I asked that is
it actually is the guys that put together the whole Scientology concept, and they did it in a bar.
no,
Clearly, after they'd had a few.
Stands to reason.
But my other question would be, well, how did religion start? We can get into that next time if you want as well.
we can really offend everyone. Wow. Well, so the only reason I asked about the Scientology is because we were just linking together with we were talking in our intro about people being Batman and basically saying that we need to do a fundraiser. So things off the back of this seminar, what am I on about? Seminar. Off the back of this podcast, we need to do a poll for the name of your work, what it's going to be, the Boom Factor or whatever it's going to be. And then we also need a fundraiser to give Ben over £1 billion so that he can actually just become Batman.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Job done. Right, Jeff, Elon, get your wallets out. Let's get it on. Yes, Ben, thanks for coming on today. It's been absolutely mint sitting down speaking to you, and I'm looking forward to being able to get you on again so we can actually talk some training. But appreciate you going into everything that you've done in the past and your background and your time serving as well. It's been absolutely mint.
No, been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Chris, any closing remarks, my friend?
No, just as I said earlier about actually, I didn't say this to you, Ben. I think I said this to my brother. I see you as a role model. I know that you go out and you get after stuff and you do the things that you say you're going to do. And obviously, I don't really talk to you all the time, but I see you training and I know what you're up to. And obviously, I'm good friends with Alanis as well. So keep doing what you're doing. Love it, and look forward to getting you back on. And thank you for your time today.
Oh, cheers. Thank you.
Whew. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. That was Ben Akin with me and Chris Lenkowski on the Lenko Show. As always, very much appreciated to have you listening. Hopefully, you've taken something useful, valuable, and somewhat entertaining from that episode. Obviously, Ben is an absolutely sick guy, and if we can help him to become Batman, that would be absolutely class. In all seriousness, we will definitely be getting Ben back on the show to talk through his actual triathlon training. So we'll pack that full of useful training info for you. But until next time, obviously, you can reach us through the usual channels, either via YouTube on Elite Football Conditioning. You can catch me and Chris via Instagram under our names. Just search Alex_Lenkowski_performance or Chris_Lenkowski_performance. And once again, thank you for listening. Spread the word. Let's get more and more people listening to this podcast, because hopefully we can spread the message of common sense and what it takes to be an elite human being. And if you've got what it takes, an elite athlete at the same time, that would be absolutely outstanding. All the best. Take care. Speak to you soon. Lenko out.